I came home early with paper bags cutting into my fingers and hope buzzing in my chest. I called out, "Layla?" No answer. I heard laughter instead, soft and breathy, slipping from our bedroom like it didn't belong to me. I told myself it was the TV. I told myself I was tired. I walked closer and heard my name said like a joke. My stomach dropped. I whispered, "No," even before my hand touched the door. I stood there shaking, listening, knowing every step forward would ruin everything I thought my life was forever and completely in that moment. I pushed the door open and froze. Lila was on the bed, sheets twisted, her hair a mess I knew too well. Marcus stood beside her, my boss, my mentor, pulling on his shirt like he owned the room. The bag slipped from my hands. Food hit the floor. Lila looked at me, not scared, not guilty, just annoyed. I said, "What is this?" My voice sounded small. Marcus smirked and said, "Ethan, relax." Lila crossed her arms and stared at me like I was interrupting something important and private on purpose. I asked, "Are you serious right now?" Layla sighed. "Don't make a scene," she said. I laughed once, sharp and broken. "A scene? You're in our bed." Marcus said, "You should hear her out." I pointed at him. "You don't talk." He raised his hands. "Be smart, Ethan. Walk away." I felt my heart pounding in my ears. I said, "Smart? You're sleeping with my wife." Layla rolled her eyes. "You're being dramatic. This just happened." Her voice was calm, practiced, like she'd rehearsed it already. I asked her, "How long?" She hesitated for half a second too long. Marcus looked at her, then at me. Lila said, "Why does it matter?" I stepped closer. "Because I deserve to know how stupid I've been." She snapped, "Long enough." I said, "Long enough for what?" She met my eyes. "Long enough to know you weren't enough." The words hit harder than seeing them together. Marcus cleared his throat. "Look, man, relationships change." I said, "Shut up." Lila didn't defend me. She didn't even flinch. I said, "So that's it? Years together and this is how it ends?" Layla shrugged. "I tried to be happy." I laughed again. "You cheated." She said, "Because you stopped trying." I shook my head. "I worked every day." Marcus said, "Work isn't love." I turned on him. "You fired people for less." He smirked. "Different rules." I looked back at Lila. "You let him talk to me like this?" She said, "You're embarrassing yourself." That hurt worse than anything else she could have said in that room. I asked, "Did you ever love me?" She didn't answer right away. Marcus stepped closer to her. She said, "Love isn't enough." I felt something crack inside my chest. "So I'm just nothing?" I asked. She sighed. "You'll be fine. You always land on your feet." I said, "With you?" She shook her head slowly. "You'll never find better than me." Marcus smiled like he'd won something. I stared at her, trying to recognize the woman I married, trying to find the girl who once cried at our kitchen table. I said, "You planned this." Lila said, "I didn't plan to get caught." Marcus laughed softly. "That's life." I stepped back. "You're both unbelievable." Marcus said, "Ethan, listen to me." I said, "I listened to you for years." He tilted his head. "Then listen once more. Walk away quietly. Don't make this ugly." I felt my hands curl into fists. You already made it ugly. Layla said, stop acting like a victim. I looked at her. You betrayed me. She crossed her arms tighter. You pushed me away. I said, no, you stepped out. Marcus checked his watch. We don't have time for this. That sentence burned into my memory. I said, so that's it? You're just done? Layla nodded. I'm choosing happiness. I whispered, at my expense. She said, that's not my problem anymore. Marcus opened the door wider. We'll give you space to pack later. I laughed again, bitter. You think I'm staying? I grabbed my jacket from the chair. Lila said, don't be childish. I looked back at her one last time. I trusted you. She looked away. Marcus said, you'll thank us someday. I shook my head. No. I'll remember this. Lila said, Ethan, don't. I said, don't what? Remember who you are? She didn't answer. The silence felt heavier than shouting. I stepped into the hallway, my legs weak, my chest tight, my mind spinning with words I couldn't say. I walked out of the apartment and into the cold night. My phone buzzed. I didn't look. I leaned against the wall and tried to breathe. I thought about the ring on my finger and yanked it off. Idiot, I muttered to myself. I replayed her voice in my head. You'll never find better than me. I laughed softly, almost hysterical. We'll see, I whispered. I didn't know where I was going. I only knew I couldn't stay. Every step away from that door felt like tearing my own skin off. I sat in my car and stared at the building. The lights in our bedroom were still on. I imagined them laughing again. I slammed the steering wheel. How did I miss this? I asked the empty seat. No answer came. My phone buzzed again. A message from Marcus. Be smart. I deleted it without replying. I rested my forehead against the wheel and closed my eyes. One thought kept repeating, louder than the rest, pounding through my head like a warning I ignored too long. I trusted the wrong person, and everything was gone. I woke up to sunlight burning through my windshield and my neck twisted wrong. My phone was dead. My mouth tasted like metal. I sat up and muttered, get it together. I drove to Jay's place on instinct. When he opened the door, he took one look at my face and said, what happened? I said, let me in. He stepped aside. I sat on his couch and stared at the wall. Jay said, tell me. I said, she cheated. He waited. I said, with my boss. His jaw tightened. Say it again. I did. He ran a hand through his hair and said, stay here. I said, I can't. Jay said, you are. He grabbed a blanket and tossed it at me. Couch is yours. I laughed without humor. I don't need charity. He said, shut up. I stared at the floor. She said I'd never find better. Jay sat across from me. She's wrong. I said, you didn't see her face. He leaned forward. I see yours. That hurt more than I expected. He handed me a glass of water. Drink. I drank. He said, you hungry? I shook my head. Thought so. I showered and borrowed clothes that didn't feel like mine. Jay waited until I came out. You going back? He asked. I nodded. I need my things. He said, I'll drive. I said, no. He said, then I'll wait. The apartment looked the same, which felt wrong. I knocked. Lila opened the door and didn't step aside. You again, she said. I said, I'm here for my clothes. She crossed her arms. Don't be dramatic. I said, move. She smiled like she was bored. We'll arrange something. I said, now. She leaned against the doorframe. You're not welcome. I saw Marcus's shoes by the couch. My chest tightened. I said, he's here. Lila said, this is his place too now. I laughed. Already? She shrugged. Life moves fast. My phone buzzed. A message lit up the screen. Resign quietly. It'll be easier. I stared at it. Lila said, who is that? I said, your boyfriend. She rolled her eyes. You're embarrassing yourself. I said, I gave you everything. She replied, you gave me stress. I shook my head. You stole my life. She said, don't be a victim. Marcus appeared behind her, smiling. Hey, Ethan. I said, I'm not talking to you. He said, you should listen. I showed him my phone. You sent this. He nodded. Advice. I said, you're pathetic. He chuckled. Careful. Lila said, just leave. I looked at her. I will. She said, good. I stepped back. This isn't over. Marcus said, it is for you. I walked out before my hands started shaking again. Back at Jay's, I dropped onto the couch. Jay said, she block you? I nodded. He cursed under his breath. Figures. I showed him the message. He read it twice. That's intimidation. I said, it's reality. He shook his head. No. That's fear. I laughed. From him? Jay said, yeah. He went to his desk and came back with a card. Take this. I read it. Priya Patel. He said, lawyer. I pushed it back. I can't afford this. Jay leaned in. You can't afford not to. I said, I don't want a fight. He replied, you're already in one. I stared at the card. What if I lose? Jay said, you already lost. I swallowed. What if she ruins me? He said, she already tried. I rubbed my face. I feel stupid. Jay said, you loved her. I said, I trusted her. He nodded. Same thing sometimes. He stood up. I'm ordering food. I said, I'm not hungry. He said, you will be. When the food came, I forced myself to eat. Jay watched me. You okay? I said, no. He said, good. That means you're human. Later, the apartment went quiet. Jay went to bed. I lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling. I pulled my wedding ring off and rolled it between my fingers. You wanted to break me, I whispered. The room didn't answer. I thought about her smile, Marcus's smirk, the message on my phone. My chest burned. I clenched the ring in my fist. Fine, I said softly. Watch what I become. I set the ring on the table and closed my eyes, knowing sleep wouldn't come, but refusing to run anymore. Priya didn't smile when I sat down. She didn't say sorry either. She looked at me and said, do you want revenge, or do you want justice? I stared at her. Aren't they the same? She shook her head. Revenge is emotional. Justice is clean. I said, I don't feel clean. She replied, then stop bleeding in front of people who enjoy it. I leaned back. What do I do? She said, you gather proof. Not stories. Not feelings. I nodded. I can do that. She slid a notepad toward me. Good. Then listen carefully. She said, no confronting. No threats. No messages you'll regret. I said, she already ruined me. Priya replied, then don't help her finish the job. I clenched my jaw. Where do I start? She said, your apartment. I hesitated. She changed the locks. Priya raised an eyebrow. Your name is still on the lease. I stood up. I'll go now. She added, take pictures of everything. I asked, and if I find nothing? She met my eyes. People who cheat always leave a trail. That sentence stayed with me all the way there. The apartment was quiet when I unlocked the door. I whispered, hello, out of habit. No answer. I stepped inside and felt like a ghost. I went straight to the bedroom. I told myself, just look. I opened drawers slowly. Shirts. Socks. Nothing. Then I saw a small folder tucked behind sweaters. My hands shook as I pulled it out. Please be nothing, I muttered. It wasn't nothing. Receipts spilled out. Hotels. Dinners. Dates I remembered working late. I whispered, wow. My stomach twisted, but I kept going. Don't stop, I told myself. I found a letter folded inside. Marcus's handwriting was sloppy but confident. I read it out loud. You deserve more. I laughed bitterly. You deserve hell. I took photos of everything. My phone buzzed. Jay texted, you okay? I typed, no, but I'm learning. I checked the closet next. A shoebox sat on the top shelf. Inside were bank statements. I frowned. That's weird. I opened my banking app. Numbers didn't match. My chest tightened. Where did it go? I scrolled again. Transfers. Small ones. Repeated. I whispered, she stole from me. I called Priya. There's money missing. She said, how much? I told her. Silence. Then she said, that's not just betrayal. That's theft. I sat on the bed. She said I never provided enough. Priya replied, she was lying. I said, what do I do now? She said, you document everything and leave. I asked, should I confront her? Priya paused. Not yet. I sighed. I want answers. She said, answers come later. Power comes now. I hung up and stared at the wall, feeling sick but focused. I left before she came home. In my car, I whispered, you really thought I'd never notice. My phone rang. Layla. I almost didn't answer. I did. What do you want? She asked. I said, I was at the apartment. She laughed. Breaking in now? I replied, checking my own home. She said, you're pathetic. I said, you stole from me. Silence. Then she laughed again. You can't even afford a lawyer. I smiled. I already have one. Her breathing changed. I said, funny how quiet you got. She snapped, you're bluffing. I said, check your drawer. Another pause. You went through my things, she asked. I replied, you went through my life. She raised her voice. You have nothing on me. I said, hotel receipts aren't nothing. She said, those mean nothing. I replied, Marcus's letter means something. Her voice dropped. You're crossing a line. I said, you crossed it first. She whispered, what do you want? I said, the truth. She scoffed. You couldn't handle it. I answered, try me. She said, you always make everything dramatic. I laughed softly. You slept with my boss. She snapped, lower your voice. I said, why? Afraid someone might hear? She said, you're making a mistake. I replied, no. I'm fixing one. She breathed out slowly. Marcus will destroy you. I said, he already tried. She said, you don't know him like I do. I answered, I know enough. Another silence. I heard fear behind it. That was new. This won't end well, she said. I replied, it already didn't. I hung up before she could say more. My hands were steady now. I texted Priya, she knows. She replied, good. Stay quiet. I leaned back and closed my eyes. I replayed every insult, every smirk. I said out loud, you lied to me. The words didn't hurt as much anymore. I opened my phone and labeled a folder proof. Step 1, I whispered. I wasn't healed. I wasn't strong. But I wasn't blind anymore. And that felt like the first real win. Marcus called me into his office like nothing had happened. Close the door, he said. I did. He leaned back and smiled. You look tired. I said, get to the point. He slid a paper across the desk. Resignation. I stared at it. You're firing me? He shook his head. I'm giving you an easy exit. I said, after sleeping with my wife? He sighed. Personal lives shouldn't affect work. I laughed. You're joking. He said, sign it. I replied, no. His smile faded. Think carefully. I said, I already did. He stood up. You don't have leverage. I said, neither do you. He tapped the paper. This protects your reputation. I said, from who? He leaned closer. From me. I felt my chest tighten. You're threatening me. He smiled again. I'm advising you. I said, you think I'm scared? He said, you should be. I shook my head. You don't get to ruin my marriage and my career. He said, you were always replaceable. That word stuck. Replaceable. He pressed a button on his desk. Security. 2 guards walked in. I said, you're kidding. Marcus said, escort him out. I grabbed my bag. This isn't over. He said, it is for you. As they walked me down the hall, people stared. Someone whispered. I kept my head up, but my ears burned. Outside, the doors shut behind me. I stood there, shaking. Fired, I muttered. My phone buzzed. Jay. How'd it go? I typed, I'm out. He replied, I'm coming. I sat on the curb and waited. Jay pulled up fast. He jumped out. What happened? I said, he fired me. Jay cursed. Because of her? I nodded. Because I wouldn't sign. Jay punched the air. That's illegal. I laughed bitterly. Everything feels illegal. He grabbed my shoulder. You're not alone. I said, I feel like it. He said, get in. In the car, I stared out the window. I gave them everything. Jay said, you gave the wrong people access. I swallowed. What do I do now? He said, you breathe. My phone rang. Nora. I hesitated, then answered. Hey. She said, are you okay? I lied. Yeah. She paused. I heard things. I closed my eyes. From who? She said, online. My stomach dropped. What online? She sent a screenshot. Layla and Marcus, smiling, captioned like a victory. I whispered, she posted this. Jay glanced over. That fast? I said, she wants me to see it. Nora said, you don't deserve this. I said, I know. She said, come home. I replied, not yet. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced Jay's living room. They're mocking me, I said. Jay replied, they're overplaying their hand. I laughed. They think they won. Jay said, winning too early makes people sloppy. My phone buzzed again. Marcus. You should have signed. I deleted it. Jay nodded. Good. I said, I feel useless. He said, you're angry. I asked, what's the difference? He said, anger moves. I sat down. I don't want to be this guy. Jay said, then don't be. The next morning, I got dressed like I still had somewhere to go. Jay noticed. Interview? I shook my head. Habit. My phone rang. Priya. I heard, she said. Already? She replied, people talk. I said, he fired me. She said, good. I blinked. Good. She said, it strengthens your case. I leaned against the counter. I can't keep losing. She said, you're not losing. You're documenting. I sighed. What's next? She said, stay clean. No contact unless necessary. I nodded. I can do that. I went for a walk to clear my head. Every step felt heavy. I passed couples laughing. Must be nice, I muttered. My phone buzzed again. Layla. We need to talk. I stared at it. I typed, through lawyers. She replied, you're being petty. I laughed out loud. You cheated. I put the phone away. I sat on a bench and stared at my hands. Who am I without my job? I whispered. The answer scared me. I stood up. Someone new, I said. That afternoon, Nora called again. I'm worried, she said. I replied, I'm handling it. She said, you don't sound okay. I said, I'm not. She was quiet. Promise me you won't do anything stupid. I nodded even though she couldn't see. I promise. After we hung up, I realized something. I wasn't thinking about revenge anymore. I was thinking about survival. That felt like progress. I went back to Jay's and said, I need a plan. Jay smiled. Finally. We sat at the table. Jay said, Step 1, protect yourself. I nodded. Step 2? He said, rebuild. I exhaled. From what? He said, from scratch. My phone buzzed one last time that day. Marcus again. You did this to yourself. I typed, no. You did. Then I blocked him. Jay raised an eyebrow. You sure? I nodded. I'm done listening. That night, I lay on the couch and stared at the ceiling. I wasn't a husband. I wasn't an employee. I was something else now. I whispered into the dark, "You pushed me out." My chest tightened. Now watch me stand. My phone rang while I was staring at the ceiling, counting cracks like they could explain my life. Ethan, a familiar voice said. I sat up. Mr. Hahn? He chuckled softly. You sound surprised. I said, I didn't think you'd call. He replied, I heard things. I sighed. Everyone has. He said, meet me. I hesitated. Why? He answered, because you look lost. I swallowed. When? He said, now. I grabbed my jacket and left before doubt could stop me. The cafe smelled like old coffee and quiet conversations. Mr. Hahn sat by the window, calm as ever. He looked up and said, sit. I did. He studied my face. You look thinner. I laughed. Stress diet. He didn't smile. Tell me. I said, my wife cheated. He nodded. I know. I added, with my boss. He raised an eyebrow. I know that too. I asked, how? He said, people talk when they think they're winning. I clenched my jaw. They think I'm done. He leaned forward. Are you? I said, I don't know. He nodded. Honest answer. I stared at the table. I want revenge. He asked, and then? I looked up. What do you mean? He said, after revenge, what's left? I didn't answer. He continued, are you trying to win her back, or win yourself back? That hit hard. I whispered, I don't know who I am without her. He said, then this is your chance. I laughed bitterly. Chance to be alone? He shook his head. Chance to be free. He sipped his coffee. I started a company. I blinked. You left corporate? He smiled. Years ago. I said, why are you telling me this? He replied, because I need someone I trust. I froze. You can't mean me. He said, I do. I shook my head. I'm a mess. He said, you're honest. I laughed. That didn't save my marriage. He said, it might save your future. I leaned back. What's the catch? He said, no drama. No public fights. No revenge missions. I frowned. That's a lot to ask. He replied, it's everything. I thought about Lila's voice, Marcus's smile. I don't know if I can let it go. He looked at me steadily. Then don't take the job. Silence stretched. I said, what kind of work? He said, contract consulting. Quiet. Clean. I nodded slowly. And if they come after me? He said, they already did. I exhaled. You're serious. He smiled. Very. I stared at my hands. Why help me? He said, because someone once helped me. I finally said, okay. He nodded. Good. He slid a folder across the table. Read this. I opened it. My name was already typed. I laughed. You planned this. He said, I hoped. I closed the folder. Thank you. He stood. Don't thank me yet. I asked, why? He replied, this will be hard. I nodded. Everything is. He placed a hand on my shoulder. Stand straight. I did. You're not broken, he said. You're bent. That stayed with me as he walked away. Outside, my phone buzzed. Layla. Stop pretending you'll survive without me. I stared at the message. My hands trembled, then steadied. I typed, I'm not surviving. I'm rebuilding. She replied instantly. You're lying. I smiled sadly. Believe that, I whispered. I put my phone away. I walked instead of driving, letting the cold air burn my lungs. Rebuilding, I repeated. It sounded strange, but strong. My phone buzzed again. Jay. You alive? I replied, yeah. He texted, want pizza? I smiled. Yes. That night, Jay listened as I told him everything. He whistled. Mr. Han? That's huge. I shrugged. It's a start. Jay nodded. That's more than you had yesterday. I sat on the couch and stared at the wall. I'm scared, I admitted. Jay said, good. I frowned. Why? He said, fear means you care. I laughed softly. I cared too much before. He replied, care better this time. I nodded. I'll try. Jay stood. You hungry? I said, always. We ate in silence, the good kind. Later, alone again, I checked my phone. No new messages. I opened my banking app and felt a flicker of control. One step, I told myself. I opened the folder Mr. Han gave me and read every line. It felt clean. Professional. Mine. I thought about the man I was a month ago. You wouldn't recognize me, I whispered. I sat back and closed my eyes. For the first time since that night, my chest didn't feel crushed. It felt sore, like a muscle finally being used again. Before sleeping, I picked up my wedding ring from the table. I rolled it between my fingers. You taught me loyalty, I said quietly. And pain. I set it down again. But not my ending. My phone buzzed once more. Layla again. You think you're better than me now? I didn't reply. I turned the phone face down. I don't need to be better than you, I said into the dark. I just need to be me. I lay back and breathed, feeling something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Strength. My phone rang at 3 a.m. I answered without checking the screen. Ethan, my aunt said, voice shaking, it's Grandma Rose. I sat up. What happened? She said, she collapsed. I was already grabbing my shoes. Which hospital? She told me. I hung up and drove too fast, talking to myself. Stay awake. Stay with me. The hospital lights were harsh. I ran to the desk. Rose Carter, I said. The nurse pointed down the hall. Room 12. I walked fast, heart pounding, hands cold. Grandma lay there smaller than I remembered. I whispered, hey. Her eyes fluttered open. You look tired, she said. I laughed weakly. You scared me. She smiled. I'm hard to get rid of. A doctor walked in. I'm Dr. Mina, she said. Family? I nodded. Grandson. She said, she's stable. I exhaled. Thank you. She looked at me. Sit. I did. She said, breathe. I realized I wasn't. Sorry, I said. She smiled. Happens. Grandma squeezed my hand. You look thinner, she said. I said, stress. She nodded. That woman? I hesitated. She left. Grandma sighed. Good. I blinked. Good. She said, a woman who betrays you is already gone. My throat tightened. I loved her. Grandma said, love shouldn't hurt like that. Dr. Mina checked the monitor. She needs rest. Grandma waved her off. He needs advice. Dr. Mina smiled. 5 minutes. Grandma leaned closer. Don't chase a woman who threw you away. I nodded. I won't. I stepped into the hallway. Dr. Mina followed. Rough night, she said. I laughed softly. That's one way to say it. She asked, do you want coffee? I nodded. We stood by the machine. She said, you're shaking. I said, adrenaline. She replied, or grief. I looked away. Both. She handed me a cup. I won't pry. I took it. Thank you. She said, if you need to talk, I'm here. I smiled sadly. Everyone says that. She replied, most people don't mean it. As we walked back, I froze. Layla stood at the end of the hallway, arms crossed, eyes fixed on me. My chest tightened. Dr. Mina noticed. Do you know her? I said, my wife. She corrected gently, your ex? I swallowed. Not yet. Layla didn't approach. She just watched. I felt exposed. Dr. Mina said, I'll give you space. I nodded. Layla finally walked over. Is she okay? She asked. I said, yes. She nodded. Good. Silence stretched. She looked me up and down. You look different. I said, so do you. She frowned. We need to talk. I said, not here. She lowered her voice. Marcus is worried. I laughed quietly. Of course he is. She grabbed my arm. He's watching you. I pulled away. Let go. She whispered, please. I looked at her. You didn't say please before. Her eyes flashed. Don't do this. I said, I'm not. She sighed. You're making things worse. I replied, you did that. Dr. Mina reappeared. Is everything okay? Lila stepped back. Fine. She walked away without another word. Dr. Mina looked at me. That seemed heavy. I nodded. It always is. She said, your grandmother asked for you. I went back in. Grandma smiled. She's pretty, she said. I laughed. You noticed? Grandma said, I'm not blind. I shook my head. Focus on resting. She said, focus on living. I squeezed her hand. I am trying. She closed her eyes. Good. I sat there until she slept, listening to the steady beep, feeling grounded. When I left the room, my phone buzzed. A message from Lila. We should talk later. I didn't reply. Another message came. Please. I put the phone away. Dr. Mina walked beside me. You don't owe anyone access to you, she said. I looked at her. How do you know? She smiled. Experience. We reached the exit. She said, "Take care of yourself." I said, "I will." She hesitated. "If you need anything," I nodded. "Thank you." I stepped outside into the cold morning. I sat in my car and breathed. I thought about Grandma's words, Lila's fear, Marcus's shadow. "I'm still here," I whispered. My phone buzzed again. "Layla. You can't ignore this forever." I typed, "Watch me." I started the engine. For the first time, I didn't feel chased. I felt ahead. Priya called me before sunrise. "I found a pattern," she said. I sat up. "In what?" She replied, "The transfers." I rubbed my eyes. "How bad?" She said, "Worse than you thought." I leaned forward. "Tell me." She said, "Small amounts." Repeated. "Routed through accounts tied to Marcus." I felt my chest tighten. "So he was stealing too?" Priya said, "With her help." I whispered, "They planned this." She answered, "They were sloppy." I asked, "What does that mean for me?" She said, "It means we stay quiet and let them hang themselves." I said, "I want to confront him." Priya replied, "You want to win." I sighed. "Same thing." She said, "Not anymore." I nodded. "Okay." She continued, "Document everything. No contact unless necessary." I asked, "What if they push?" She said, "They will." I laughed softly. "Good." She paused. That wasn't the right reaction. I said, "I'm done being scared." She replied, "Then be smart." I hung up and stared at the wall, feeling focused in a way I hadn't before. Jay knocked on the door. "You look intense," he said. I replied, "I feel clear." He raised an eyebrow. "That's new." I told him everything. He whistled. "They're screwed." I said, "Not yet." He asked, "What's the plan?" I said, "There isn't one." He frowned. "That sounds reckless." I smiled. "It's patient." He leaned back. "That scares me more." I laughed. "Me too." My phone buzzed. "Marcus. We need to talk." Jay pointed. "Block him." I shook my head. "Not yet." Later that day, I met Mr. Han at a quiet office. He looked up from his laptop. "You're early," he said. I replied, "Couldn't sleep." He nodded. "Good sign." I asked, "Why?" He said, "Means you're thinking." I hesitated. "There's something you should know." He closed the laptop. "Tell me." I explained everything. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "They underestimate you." I asked, "Is that dangerous?" He smiled. "For them." I exhaled. "I don't want this to affect work." He said, "It won't. Unless you let anger drive." I nodded. "I won't." That night, Marcus called again. I answered. "What do you want?" He said, "You're making a mistake." I replied, "Funny. That's what you said last time." He lowered his voice. "Drop whatever you're planning." I asked, "Planning what?" He snapped, "Don't play dumb." I said, "I'm not playing." Silence. Then he said, "You don't know who you're dealing with." I smiled. "Neither do you." He hung up. Jay looked at me. You okay? I nodded. Better than him. My phone buzzed again. Lila this time. Please answer. I didn't. The next morning, my tire was flat. Jay crouched and cursed. Someone slashed this. I stared at it. I know. He looked up. You sure? I said, Marcus. Jay stood. Call the cops. I nodded. Officer Ruiz arrived an hour later. He examined the tire. Clean cut, he said. I asked, deliberate? He nodded. Looks that way. I said, I know who did it. He raised an eyebrow. Got proof? I shook my head. Not yet. He handed me a card. Call me if anything else happens. I took it. Thank you. He looked at me. These guys always think they're untouchable. Nora called that afternoon. I'm scared, she said. I replied, I know. She said, this is getting dangerous. I sighed. It was always dangerous. She paused. Promise me you'll stop. I said, I can't. She whispered, why? I answered, because if I do, they win. She sniffed. I don't want to lose you. I closed my eyes. You won't. She didn't sound convinced. Just be careful, she said. I nodded. I am. When we hung up, I felt the weight of responsibility settle deeper. That evening, Priya emailed me documents. I read every line. This is solid, I whispered. Jay leaned over. They're toast. I shook my head. Not yet. My phone buzzed again. Layla. He's getting angry. I typed, you should be too. She replied instantly. What does that mean? I stared at the screen. It means you chose the wrong side. 3 dots appeared. Then nothing. Jay watched me. You sure about this? I nodded. For the first time, yes. I couldn't sleep. I sat on the couch, staring at my phone. I thought about the man I was months ago. You would have begged, I said quietly. I opened my laptop and reviewed my work. Everything was clean. Legitimate. Mine. I smiled. I did this without them. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Hello? Marcus's voice came through, tight. You think you're clever. I said, I think you're scared. He laughed. You don't scare me. I replied, then why are you calling at midnight? Silence. Then he said, this ends now. I answered, it already started. The next day, I filed another report with Officer Ruiz. He nodded. This helps, he said. I asked, enough? He replied, almost. I smiled. Good. On my way out, I saw Lila across the street, watching me. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She looked small. I felt nothing. My phone buzzed. Priya. Stay quiet. Let it unfold. I typed back, I trust you. I put the phone away and kept walking. For the first time, the trap was set, and I wasn't inside it. The voice note came instead of a text. I stared at my phone before playing it. Ethan, can we talk? Lila's voice sounded soft, almost careful. I scoffed. That's new. I typed back, public place. She replied instantly. Fine. We met at a cafe downtown, glass walls, too many people to hide anything. She arrived late. She always used to. She looked the same at first glance, but when she sat down, I saw it. Tired eyes. Tight smile. She said, "You look well." I said, "You don't." She flinched. I deserved that. She wrapped her hands around her cup. "Marcus isn't who you think." I laughed before I could stop myself. "And you are?" She winced. "I'm serious." I leaned back. "So am I." She said, "He's angry all the time now." I shrugged. "Sounds familiar." She frowned. "You're enjoying this?" I shook my head. "No. I'm done caring." She bit her lip. "You stopped trying." I leaned forward. "No. You stopped choosing." Her eyes flashed. "You weren't there." I said, "I was working." She snapped, "You chose work over me." I replied, "You chose him over us." She reached across the table and grabbed my wrist. "Lower your voice." I pulled back. "Don't touch me." She whispered, "He's watching you." I laughed softly. "He's been watching since the beginning." Her voice shook. "Please. Just let it go." I stared at her. "That's why you're here." She swallowed. "I'm scared." That was it. Not love. Not regret. Fear. I said, "You should be." She shook her head. "He's dangerous." I replied, "So are consequences." She whispered, "You're going to ruin him." I said, "No. He did that himself." She leaned back, eyes glassy. "I made a mistake." I nodded. "Many." She said, "I thought he'd protect me." I laughed. "You thought wrong." She wiped her cheek. "You don't understand." I said, "I understand perfectly." She asked, "Is there anything I can do?" I paused. "Tell the truth." She looked away. "I can't." I stood up. "Then we're done." She said, "Ethan, wait." I said, "Goodbye, Layla." I walked out without looking back, my heart steady for the first time in weeks. Later that night, I sat across from Mina at a quiet diner. She asked, "Rough day?" I nodded. "I met my wife." She raised an eyebrow. "How'd that go?" I said, "She's scared." Mina stirred her drink. "And you?" I hesitated. "I want revenge." Mina looked at me carefully. "That's honest." I sighed. "I hate that I still feel this." She said, "Feelings don't make you weak." I asked, "Then what does?" She replied, "Letting them own you." I stared at the table. "I don't want to forgive." Mina nodded. "You don't have to." I looked up. "Really?" She said, "Forgiveness is a choice, not a debt." I said, "I want him to pay." Mina leaned in. "Make sure revenge doesn't become your new prison." I exhaled. "What if it already is?" She smiled gently. "Then you unlock the door." I laughed softly. "You make it sound easy." She said, "It's not." Silence stretched. I finally said, "She looked small." Mina nodded. "People always do when their lives collapse." I said, "I felt nothing." Mina replied, "That's healing." I paid the bill and stood. "Thank you." She smiled. "Anytime." When I got home, my phone buzzed. Layla. We can fix this. I deleted it. Another buzz. I miss you. I turned the phone face down. You miss control, I muttered. I opened my laptop and reviewed Priya's files. Everything was moving. Quietly. Exactly how it should. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I ignored it. I lay back on the couch and stared at the ceiling. Your crown is cracking, I whispered. And for the first time, I wasn't the one beneath it. Priya called me just after noon. It's happening, she said. I leaned back in my chair. How bad? She replied, audit first. Investigation next. I closed my eyes. Marcus? She said, already sweating. I asked, what do I do? She said, nothing. I smiled. That's my favorite part. She warned, stay quiet and let it unfold. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. I trust you. When we hung up, I sat there in silence, waiting for the rush. It didn't come. Instead, I felt calm. That surprised me. Jay burst into the apartment later, grinning. You see the news? I asked, which part? He laughed. Marcus's audit. I shrugged. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy. Jay clapped his hands. Man, you did it. I shook my head. I didn't. He frowned. Come on. I said, I just stopped covering for them. Jay nodded slowly. That's scarier. My phone buzzed. Layla. I stared at the name. Jay noticed. You gonna answer? I shook my head. Not yet. The next morning, she showed up at Jay's door. Jay opened it and froze. He said. Ethan? I walked out and saw her standing there, eyes red, hair messy, crying like the world finally hit back. She whispered, can we talk? I nodded. 5 minutes. Jay stepped aside. Lila looked around like she didn't belong. I made a mistake, she said. I waited. She sniffed. Marcus is in trouble. I said, I know. She looked up. They're investigating him. I said, that happens when people steal. She flinched. I didn't think it would go this far. I replied, you didn't think at all. She stepped closer. I'm scared. I nodded. You should be. She cried harder. I didn't mean to hurt you. I looked at her and felt something strange. Peace. No anger. No pull. Just distance. I said, you didn't make one mistake. She looked up. What? I continued, you made a life out of them. She whispered, I was unhappy. I replied, so you destroyed someone else. She shook her head. I loved you. I said, you loved control. She swallowed. Is there any chance? I shook my head. No. She stared at me like she didn't recognize me. You're different. I smiled slightly. You forced that. She wiped her face. I really messed up. I nodded. Yes. She whispered, you really found better. I met her eyes. I found myself. That broke her. She sobbed quietly. I didn't touch her. I didn't comfort her. Jay cleared his throat. Time. She looked at me one last time. I'm sorry. I said, I know. She turned and walked away, shoulders shaking. I closed the door and leaned against it, breathing slow and steady. Jay looked at me. You okay? I nodded. Yeah. He raised an eyebrow. That's it? I said, that's it. He smiled. I'm proud of you. I laughed softly. Don't be. He said, too late. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I ignored it. Jay said, you hungry? I replied, always. Life felt oddly normal again. That felt like the real win. Weeks passed quietly. Too quietly for Marcus. His name disappeared from social circles. His friends stopped calling. His posts vanished. Priya kept me updated. He's cornered, she said. I asked, Lila? She sighed. She's cooperating. I nodded. Figures. I didn't feel joy. I felt done. One evening, Mr. Han called. You ready? I asked, for what? He replied, a work event. I hesitated. I don't do crowds. He chuckled. You will tonight. I sighed. Okay. He said, we're something sharp. I smiled. I can do that. The event was bright and loud. Mr. Han introduced me to clients. This is Ethan, he said. He's one of my best. I shook hands. I smiled. I listened. I felt like I belonged. Halfway through, I felt it. That familiar presence. I turned my head and saw her across the room. Layla. Alone. Watching. She looked smaller than before, like someone who lost their place. Our eyes met for a second. She didn't wave. Neither did I. Mr. Han leaned in. You okay? I nodded. Better than ever. He smiled. Good. I turned back to the conversation. I talked about work, about plans, about the future. I laughed. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew she was still there, watching from the sidelines, seeing a life she threw away. I felt no urge to prove anything. I had already moved on. When the night ended, I stepped outside and breathed in the cool air. This is mine, I whispered. I walked forward, not running, not looking back, finally free.